Good afternoon, and I apologize for the delay that we had. We had some technical difficulties getting this started. Welcome to this WEO webinar. My name is Scott Shook with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. I'll be the facilitator for today's webinar. As a reminder, all participants on the call are in mute mode. Please use the raise your hand function if you have questions that you'd like to speak during the session. You can also use the question box to ask questions, and you will receive answers in return. Documents for today's meeting can be downloaded in the handouts area of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Illinois workNet website, usually within the next 48 hours. You will receive a survey about today's webinar, and we would appreciate your feedback on that. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Christy Jones, who will be presenting today's session.
Thank you, Scott. My screen just changed. Can everyone still see the PowerPoint?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, my screen changed to seeing a video of one of our attendees.
One moment, please. So Christy.
And now it's switched to another attendee.
Oh, I see, yes.
There we go.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Christy Jones with KEB. I am also joined by some presenters today. Diana Robinson from NIU, Mike Baker from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and Ron Payne with the Department of Employment Security. We also have core partner representatives on the line to answer any program-specific questions. I believe we have Janice Taylor-Brown, Todd Lowry, and Doug Morton. I did want to make a note on behalf of our Title II and Perkins providers. They are tied up between a conference and stakeholder outreach for Perkins 5. So if there are any questions today, KEB will make sure to record those and work with Title II and Perkins to get you a response. So to jump into regional and local planning guidance and process, last week we issued the regional and local planning guide, and we hope that everyone had a chance to sit down and review the guide. I thought it would be helpful to go through the planning cycle. Can everyone see the planning cycle slide on your screen?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure it was advancing properly. So as I said, on October 14th, the regional and local planning guide was issued. The next step that everyone is anxiously awaiting are the issuance of the regional data packets, and that is October 31st, and Ron Payne is on the phone line today, and he will be able to speak to that. In between the issuance of the regional data packets and the date, February 14th, the target date when regional and local plans will be posted for a 30-day public comment period, is the actual time for plan development. February 14th, as I mentioned, is the target date to get out your plans for a 30-day public comment period. The 30-day public comment period is required based on final rule, and we will talk about the specifics of that later during this presentation. After public comments are received, it is required that regional and local teams take those comments into consideration and update plans based on those comments. They are also required to provide public comments as a component of the local plan submission that is actually in the regional and local planning guide, and I will point the specific section out later during the presentation. Regional and local plans must be finalized and submitted to the designee of the governor, who is Mike Baker, by March 31st of 2020. That opens up the 90-day period according to final rule, and the state technical assistance team has 90 days to review the regional and local plans, and that will wrap up on June 30th with the effective date of the 2020 to 2024 plan as July 1st of 2020. As a reminder, I put on the screen the final rule citation for regional plans, and I put the main 6 dot points on the screen. So based on final rule, regional plans are required to cover regional service strategies, sector initiatives for in-demand industry sectors or occupations, an analysis of regional market data, which we will get into further today, coordination of administrative cost arrangements, also coordination of transportation and supportive services, and then an agreement on how the region will collectively negotiate and reach agreement on local levels of performance. Local plans have a different final rule citation, and there are 2 citations in final rule. There's many more requirements for local plans, but I put some of the key requirements on this slide. So policies, procedures, and local activities, existing and emerging in-demand industry sectors and occupations, employment needs of employers, knowledge and skills needed to meet the employment needs of employers, current labor force, employment and unemployment trends, an emphasis on identifying individuals with barriers to employment, education and training, and the overall requirement to incorporate the local plan into the regional plan. The regional and local planning guide was developed from the suggestions that the field provided during a previous webinar a few months ago. So the chapter format for the 2020 to 2024 planning guide remained the same as 2017. Plans must follow the chapter format as laid out in the planning guide. There are 6 chapters, and we'll go through those in the next slide. Plans must be responsive to each number or letter in the guide. So if you remember the 2016 and 2017 guidance, there were some suggested questions. They were thought-provoking questions, and regional and local areas found those to be more confusing than helpful. So we were able to condense those and make all letters and numbers now mandatory, so there's no discrepancy, so it's very black and white. Both regional and local plans will be reviewed for quality and of compliance and completeness. So the state technical assistance team will review for those 2 elements, completeness and compliance. And then I've put several links throughout this webinar, but the regional and local planning guide can always be accessed through the link that is on the screen right now. So as I mentioned, there are 6 chapters to the regional and local planning guide. The first 3 are the regional components. So chapters 1, 2, and 3 make up the regional plan. Chapters 4, 5, and 6 make up the local plan. And it's imperative that the plans be submitted in this chapter format. This keeps all of the regional and local plans consistent throughout the state, and it also helps with the review process. I'm going going to turn the presentation over to Diana Robinson for this slide. Diana, are you able to be unmuted and speak? Okay, if Diana is unavailable, what I wanted to point out is there are some new additions to the guide that you may recognize if you've had time to go through it. Two of those are Executive Order 3 and the Economic Development Plan. So if you look through the Regional and Local Planning Guide, you will see teal highlights throughout the plan. And what those are is it points out any action area from the action agenda for workforce development and job creation that came from Executive Order 3. A high percentage of the action areas were applicable and able to be added to regional and local planning. And they aren't areas that are going to be uncommon to you or be a big stretch. They're content areas that you will have familiarity with.
Christy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've promoted Diana Robinson to a panelist, and Diana should be able to speak to us if you want to continue with her.
Excellent, thanks, Scott. I will turn it over to you, Diana. I was just explaining that the content, it sticks out because it is highlighted, and we were able to add almost all of the action areas to the regional and local planning guide.
Okay, that's super, thank you. And apologies for the technical challenge. Good afternoon, everyone. I have just 2 slides that I wanted to touch on, and hopefully none of this will be news to you because we've certainly been talking about Executive Order 3 for some time, as well as the new 5-year economic development plan. So this is going to be a fairly high-level overview, but we're excited because this is really the first time that the governor's vision toward workforce development and education and economic development have been incorporated into these guidelines. So Executive Order 3 was released in early January of this year, and an action plan that was crafted by all of the WIOA partner agencies was sent to the governor's office in April. That included extensive lists of activities that were going to be undertaken to address the 3 broad action areas in that guide. The 3 action areas, which Christy just said will be in the guide, just to provide again a very broad outline. The 3 areas are uniting workforce development partners around regional cluster strategies. That in itself is a major integrative activity to ensure that we can collectively move the needle a lot better if we're looking at similar clusters and sector priorities. The second one is preparing workers for a career and not just a job. And then the third is connecting job seekers with employers. So those 3 broad areas are ones that we are looking to the local and regional planning process to help develop and implement. Similarly, the 5-year economic development plan, which was just released earlier this month, lays out 3 priority areas as well. One is just creating a foundation for long-term growth. Another is reducing the equity gap. And the third is attracting more workers and businesses to Illinois. So even though these 2 sets are not exactly the same, they're very complementary. And these 6 priority areas taken together represent a very robust vision on the part of the governor. So while the Economic Development Plan and the EO3 report are driving the workforce and education agendas, they're also very much driving the Unified State Plan. And we are looking, again, to the local and regional plans to roll up and be the major drivers for achieving these various priorities and the governor's vision at the end of the day. So next slide, please. So the other major concept that is embedded in these guidelines is service integration. And that's something else that you probably heard a lot about, but it's one of the more important recent IWIB policy arenas. It's very much been embraced by the governor and has been embedded throughout the Executive Order 3 report. It's been translated into service integration goals, into a self-assessment process, and into the work plans. And each of the local workforce areas and their boards have already submitted an action plan that prioritizes between the top 3 to 5 service integration issues that they think are the highest priorities for the next year. So those plans have been developed, ideally in close consultation with the various WIOA partners, and each of the local workforce areas has those priorities. What's important is that the expectation is that those priorities will be very much considered in both the local and regional planning process. These were not just exercises that were intended to kind of point out where the continuous improvement opportunities are, but to be used and integrated into these plans in very meaningful ways. So essentially what we've asked each of the local workforce areas to do is to focus on the challenges to aligning the plans and activities within both the regions and the local areas. And the assumption being that as they work on each challenge over the successive cycles of planning, that service integration will grow stronger and more effective year after year. One of the important activities that will be required as a part of that is to align the workforce planning process with the strategic plans of the other required partners. So we've already mentioned economic development, but the Perkins plan, Perkins 5, and the adult education plan, there are a number of other planning documents and processes that we're hoping to see become aligned and eventually, to the extent possible, unified. So the third major bullet is that the MOU is also being viewed as an implementation opportunity for service integration, that as the details get worked out among the different WIOA partners, they can become codified and operationalized through the MOU provisions. So that's an opportunity that's already in place, and we hope that local areas will leverage that document in that process. And included is an updated economic development region and LWIA map. Christy, did you have anything to add to that one in particular?
Mike Baker, do you have anything to add on the EDR and LWIA map?
No, just the new map reflects the realignment of LWIA's 17 and 23 and 22 and 24.
Great, thank you. And I guess my final comment is more of an observation, and that has to do with the fact that integration is a process and a policy priority that affects not only the services that are being delivered through our local workforce area, but as you can see in this slide, it also affects how the planning processes are becoming more and more integrated. So we're hoping to reduce fragmentation, increase our ability to leverage scarce resources, and see a much more streamlined set of planning processes beginning with this planning cycle. So any of my colleagues who've been working on this for quite some time, you have other comments or insights?
Diana, if I could add two things. Whitney Thompson from Perkins was unable to join us, as I said earlier, and she just had two comments to add regarding service integration and the Perkins 5 plan development. She wanted to mention that workforce board staff will be engaged in Perkins planning, and they already are. They should be willing to share employer feedback as well as labor market information. And then the results of the comprehensive local needs assessment could be helpful to local WIOA planning. I wanted to add a comment on the dot point, that's incorporation of MOU and service integration action plan So in the past, there were components of regional and local plans that were cut and paste directly from MOUs. And the feedback from the local areas is that this was a redundancy. And we looked at it from a compliance standpoint, and it also seemed redundant. But in order to show linkages or connections, there was value in having some language in the local plans. And so that's actually included for you on page 11 of the local components. It's chapter 4. And basically, it's just language reading that the MOU and any subsequent modifications are incorporated by reference into the plan. The Integration Action Plan is obviously new since the 2017 issuance of the guide. So the Integration Action Plan and any subsequent modifications all are incorporated by reference into this plan. And that language can simply be moved into your local plan. What I say is just by putting in those two areas of language does not cover the MOU and the Service and Integration Action Plan in entirety. There are still going to be areas where you can show linkages between your MOU or your Service Integration Action Plan, and that content should be included in your response as applicable.
Great, thanks, Christy. I did have one more comment, and that's just to reinforce and emphasize that with the completion of the self-assessment processes by all of the LWIAs, that information is there now for you to incorporate into your WIOA local planning process. But the state WIOA agency staff team is also taking a look at all 22 of the plans that have been submitted and are in the process of identifying kind of the common themes and issues. As we pull that information together, that should be also very helpful at the regional planning stage. So regional can talk to the higher level issues that run across LWIAs, and the local self-assessment results can be used obviously at the local level for your WIOA planning.
Thank you, Diana. Our next slide is on data packets, which will be released at the end of the month. And Ron Payne is going to give an update on data packets and their issuance. Scott, can we ensure that Ron Payne is able to speak?
One moment.
Thank you.
Make sure he's available.
Okay.
So he's been promoted, Ron has been promoted to a panelist and should be able to speak to us.
Okay.
One moment, please. So if Ron's available, I have promoted him as a panelist, but we're not picking up audio from Ron right now.
Okay, thank you, Scott. I also sent him a message, so I will jump over the next two slides, and if Ron becomes available, we will revisit these slides. So as I mentioned earlier, regional and local plans must go out for public comment. That is explained in Chapter 6 of the local plan. Requirements include describe the process used to provide a 30-day public comment period, including an opportunity to have input into the development of the local plan, particularly for representatives of businesses, education, and labor organizations. There's also a requirement to provide a summary of the public comments received and how this information was addressed by the CEO, partners, and the local board in the final plan. It is the regional and local area's responsibility to make sure that your public notice is distributed to the widest public audience, including individuals with barriers to employment. I'm going to go through some frequently asked questions, whether they came from the previous regional local planning process, came up during the initial webinar that we had this year. And then when we put these up, Mike Baker will give an overview of how you can questions for technical assistance moving forward, an FAQ page on Illinois WorkNet. And then you will also have the opportunity to always log in and review the responses to the questions that we are addressing today and other FAQs that come up along the regional local planning process. So the first question came up during the webinar we had a few months back. And the question was, the state of Illinois' 2020 to 2024 Unified State Plan process is not final. And as you are aware, the Unified State Plan process is happening right now and is in process. How do we use the Unified State Plan to inform regional and local plans, since the Unified State Plan process is parallel? And the answer to that is the state Unified State Plan vision, principles, and strategies are final. They have been approved by state agency leaders, the Unified State Plan Work Group, and the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board. And for reference, just to put them all in one location, these are included on pages 1 and 2 of the Regional and Local Planning Guide. And they are specifically referenced in the Regional and Local Planning Guide. I'm going to turn the next slide over to Mike Baker, and I will go ahead and read the question, and then Mike can elaborate on the answer. Can regions or LWIAs hire a contractor or consultant to write plans? And then the follow-up question is, can Title I-B grant funds be used to fund this activity?
Thank you, Christy. The bottom line answer is yes and yes. Local funds may be used to support regional and local planning, and you may use them to hire outside help to facilitate meetings, to do data research or help you interpret data, and also draft your version of the plan. We also encourage regional teams in local areas to seek investment, either cash or in kind, from regional partners that can benefit or do benefit from the workforce system, or who have a vested interest in seeing the workforce system perform at a high level as possible. The overarching goal being that we'd like to make this planning process, bigger than the compliance document, and make it an opportunity to have real skin in the game from stakeholders in the regions to participate in the process and make it more meaningful for them as well as for all of us. So, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Questions are about.
Christy?
Is that you, Ron?
Yes, I figured it out.
I apologize, everyone. We are going to jump into the data packets and then give you an opportunity to ask questions. Ron does have another call he needs to get to. So Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I have the data packet slide on the screen.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Christy, and thanks everyone for bearing with us during our technical issues we had there. I just want to talk briefly about the data packets. As Christy mentioned earlier in the webinar, the data packets are to be issued on October 31st. We're feverishly trying to complete them now, and I think we'll make that deadline. One thing that I would tell you in comparison to the data packets that we released for the last time that we did this, we tried using a lot of user feedback, and we were listening and tried to make them more user friendly this time. One thing that we did add to each of the slides this time, where applicable anyway, was we will have a sentence or two of the takeaway of the graph, like on a population data or whatever the slide is. We're going to tell you, what the main point is of this graph or this table. So it should be easier for everybody to interpret that way. I just want to run real quickly. I want to let you know about some of the data that we're going to have in here this time. We're going to have a lot of population data. We're going to have population by the large cities in your region. We're going to do it by age brackets. We're going to give you veteran population by age, type of veteran status, race, and education. Disabled population by age and type of disability. Population by language. Last time we just did the percentage of households where English was not the primary language, so we're breaking them all out now and showing you what languages are spoken. We're doing a lot of educational attainment data of the population, bachelor's degree, associate's degree, that kind of stuff. Median income data by the households. We're doing it by county and by race. Percent of we're putting a lot of poverty data in at this time. Percent of the population that's below poverty. And then some of the different attributes of those that are in poverty. And then the middle part of the last round of packets, I think, was not really well understood. We're trying to do a much better job on that. And basically what most of that was the top occupations with job openings by industry. People had asked for a lot more occupational data in this round, and we listened, and that's what we're going to attempt to provide here. That's just kind of a quick rundown of what's going to be in the packet. Another thing I would mention, the data team will provide technical analysis for an area of regional interest upon request. Basically, what that means is if you have a certain industry in your area or a certain subsector industry, and it's not included in the data packet, we're willing and we will provide to you a deeper dive into that industry sector that you're requesting, okay? The next one, data team can offer one-on-one data webinars with regional planning teams to review their specific data. And again, we're not going to just to have webinars that everybody has to attend. We're going to do these upon request, okay? So if you're having troubles interpreting some of this data, or you just want to do a webinar to make sure that you're interpreting things correctly, please contact us and we will do our best to provide any kind of technical assistance that we can with the data that we do provide to you. One other thing that I would say is if you could, a little bit later in the webinar, there will be a listing of the regional economists, IDS economists around the state. And if we could please route the questions, the data questions, through those folks, and they will get it to the data team, and we can go from there on it. And the last line, we really are here to make your life better and easier for you. Data is not a friendly subject to a lot of people, and we want to try to make it as friendly and easy for you all as we can. And that's all I've got right now, Christy.
Are there any questions for Ron while he is on the line? The chat pod is open. One of the that I see is there a list of the IDES economists somewhere? That's a great question. I'm going to put up a link later in the presentation with resources, and one of those is a link to the IDES economists by Elwea. And that is also on the Illinois WorkNet regional and local planning landing page.
And Christy, I'm not sure if I was on that list or not, but folks can certainly contact me directly as well.
Thanks, Ron. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat pod while Ron is on the line, and we can make sure you get answers today.
Christy, would you like to answer a couple of questions, or would Ron like to answer a couple of questions that we received?
Absolutely.
So it says, will the data packets be broken down by county?
Where possible, we definitely will have the data by each individual county as well as the region. So yes, the answer is yes, okay. It will be.
How recent is the data and what is the source?
There's various sources of the data, and there's various, I guess, ages of the data. We will provide to you the most recent data that we can. I can tell you that a lot of the data, as far as occupational data goes, will be based on 2016 to 2026 occupational projections data by economic development region. The population, all of the population data, the poverty data, what else? The veterans data. Most all of that data is from the American Community Survey. I would say that the source of most all of the data is either the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the American Community Survey, which is part of the Census Bureau. And it will all be the most recent that's available.
So one additional question. The question is, who reviews the 22 state plans?
Help, Christy?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So for the regional and local plans, they are reviewed by the interagency technical assistance team that is made up of core and required partners.
Thank you. That's all the questions we have.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Christy, I'm going to need to jump off here now. I've got that other meeting at 2, okay?
Thanks, Ron.
And if there's any other questions, certainly let me know, and I'll be happy to do what I can do to answer.
Thanks, everyone. To dive back into the frequently asked questions, the next 2 slides address who should serve on the regional planning team and then the local planning team. And I want to preface these slides, but these are just ideas. They are not at all an inclusive list. But in regional planning teams, we have partners, required partners, and leaders from private sector industries in the region, economic development, education and training providers, and special population advocates and elected officials. For local planning teams, we want to draw specific attention to all parties to the Memorandum of Understanding, leaders from business, economic development, education, special population advocates, and other constituent groups, elected officials, and organizations committed to community prosperity. What is the role of Illinois' WIOA core partners in the writing of the regional and local plans? and who ultimately is responsible for the regional plan. According to final rule, LWIBs are ultimately responsible and accountable for the regional plan. However, in the spirit of WIOA, there's a strong emphasis on integration and coordination of partners. And partners are equally responsible for the development, writing, and execution of the plans. We know that this was a major concern in the 2016 and 2017 regional and local planning process, and the field brought this to our attention in the webinar a few months back. So if there is a state partner or a partner that is not showing up, is not providing information or data, please contact the technical assistance team. That will use their resources and actual contacts on the team to come up with a solution or to reach out to the core or required partners. You can also contact KEB if you have an issue, and we can work directly with the interagency technical assistance team. If Title I or board staff, you can reach out directly to Mike Baker, and he can take that to the technical assistance team as well. I'm going to turn the next few slides over to Mike Baker to talk about how you can receive technical assistance throughout the regional and local planning process, offer some resources that we already have loaded to the Illinois WorkNet regional and local planning page, and then how you can see questions that are being asked by other regions, LWIAs, and partners.
Thank you, Christy. We have established a landing page at Illinois WorkNet, and you may reach that page at the first link on the slide that you see now. And you may also, at that page, there is a link to submit a frequently asked question. And those questions will come in, they'll be reviewed by the interagency technical assistance team. And questions and responses of general interest to the field will be posted online. When you submit a question, it remains private, and if the question is more appropriately handled by a direct response to the inquirent, we will handle it that way. But in any case, when a response is posted, the individual that sent in the inquiry will be notified that the response has been posted to the FAQ page. And then we are also working on a system to send a notice to the points of contact on each planning team whenever a new FAQ response is posted. So that way, if something is of general interest to all planning teams, you'll be made aware whenever there's new content based on an inquiry that came into the team. There is a lot of information at this page. We have tried to organize it in a way that is as intuitive and user-friendly as possible. So the page is up and live now, so I would encourage you all to go check it out. On this page, a couple of the resources we have direct links here are the list of the employment security economists that are stationed across the state, and then also the list of the points of contact for each of the regional planning teams. Next slide, please. For submitting your plan way out at the end of March, here is the email box to submit your plan. As we've done in the past, we'd like the local areas in regions that are made up of multiple local workforce areas. We'd like the local board staff to get together and determine who will submit the regional plan on behalf of all the local areas in that region. And then each local area is responsible for submitting its own plan. Also, one other comment that's relevant to this, well, actually, it's the next slide. So we do have an example here of how that would work. We picked a southern region. One of the local areas would submit the regional plan on behalf of both local areas, and then each would submit their own local plan. Next slide. Also on that landing page is a link to the status dashboard for local regional plans and MOUs. So this is an online tool that is updated that allows you to see plans that have reached approval status and also track the status of your plan once it's submitted as it's going through the review process. Another nice thing about this, if you would like to see how other local areas or other regions structured their plan or the kind of format or content they used in their plan, this is open to the public, so the entire world can look at your plan and download a copy. They can search the documents for key terms if they wish, and this dashboard is also sortable and filterable, so that if you just want to look at regional plans, you can set up the settings and it will highlight those items. So the link to the dashboard is on the landing page. Another link that's on the landing page that we don't have highlighted in a slide, but we have archived the landing page that was used in the last planning process. So if you'll recall, there were all kinds of technical assistance documents, and the regional data packets were housed there. If anybody, for any reason, would like to go back and review what was done last time, all of that information is still out there and archived, and there is a link to that archive page on the 2020 landing page. So if you want to go back and look at stuff, you can still get to it. It's still out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. There was a question that came up in the chat pod about who receives the data packets. And I want to confirm this with you, Mike, but I am assuming that those are submitted to the regional point of contact?
Yes, all communication from the state on this will go to the individual that's assigned as the point of contact for the regional planning team, other than a direct response for an FAQ that they would submit. They would get a notification of that automatically.
And the updated regional point of contact list is available on the regional and local planning landing page. I'll open it up to questions now. I think that catches us up with the questions that were submitted in the chat pod. But please enter any other questions that you may have. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, I do want to remind people that if you joined the webinar late, and I know we had some technical difficulties, a recording of this webinar will be posted to Illinois WorkNet.
We did have a question that Pam was going to point out. If all parties to the MOU don't participate in the development of the MOU, what makes us believe they'll participate in the development of the plans? ILWIBs have absolutely no recourse to make this happen. That's the question.
Sure, thank you for the question. I think showing that you have the due diligence to reach out and invite those partners to the process, those individuals are required to obviously sign the MOU. And I understand there's not necessarily a signature process signing off on the regional and local plan, but your due diligence in reaching out and being inclusive of all those partners is the critical element.
That's all the questions we have currently.
Okay, well that concludes our presentation today. As Mike went through, there's now a mechanism to submit questions, and if that question is applicable to the entire field, we will start the process of posting new FAQs. We will also take the 5 or 6 questions that we had during the presentation today and get those added to the FAQ.
One other item to point out regarding who receives the data packets. When the data packets are complete, we will load those to the regional landing page on Illinois WorkNet so that your team members can access those from a mobile phone or from a computer on an as-needed basis. So they will be available there as well.
With that, thank you for attending today's webinar. It's my understanding that you should have received an email that included all of the documents that were included or were shared in the webinar. If you have any additional questions, please contact either myself or you. Christy is available. But within that document, there are active links within the PowerPoint. Again, we apologize for the technical issues, and we thank you for attending today's session.